Where do you think we should go from here?
Well, Jeff, I've been really encouraged. This is my first Truman Centre event that I've been to, and I've been really encouraged by the presentations and by the expertise that God has drawn together in this network. So I'm confident and positive from this meeting. Yesterday, Tuna Calla, who I think is a fantastic model and an inspiration for how a Christian can operate with complete integrity, biblically, prayerfully in politics, really inspirational to me. But he said Europe is in search of inspiration. It's dominated by social and economic liberalism, and I agree, but I also think that the European problem, we've talked about the European problem, but it's a Western problem. It's not just a European problem we're facing here. We're suffering from what the chief rabbi in the UK, Jonathan Sachs, has identified as arteriosclerosis of culture, a culture growing old. We need to relearn the moral disciplines of freedom, which means that we're in a bit of a desert at the moment, culturally, in different ways, but in the Bible, the desert is always a strategic place. It's a place where God takes people to shape them for another.
I'm going to have to keep interrupting just so that we keep moving along.
Okay.
In terms of the concrete things you take away from here,
the concrete things are the concrete things. We've got the thinking we need to start doing, not just teaching with our young people, and I'm glad why I'm here, but actually training our young people. We need to grow an entire generation that changes church, and so the church has a culture of public leadership. There's no other way, there's no shortcut to this. It's a long game, it's transgenerational, it's strategic, and there's no other way forward.
So we've got to think long term.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. I know there's lots more to be said. This is a bit frustrating as time is ticking away. Kishore, from the Acton Institute.
Can I make three really brief points about what I'm taking away from this and what I think might be a way forward. Of course, I'm coming from the Acton Institute, which is an ecumenical group, Catholics, Protestants, Evangelicals, Orthodox, all working together. So I think that's part of the solution. Right, as you see here, you have some of that represented, but I would say for Europe, you need to have what the Catholic Church has referred to the two lungs of Europe breathing together, not just a half of the lung. And that it's very important that Christians join together, especially on political and social causes, and work together where they have lots of areas of agreement, as opposed to maybe some of the more contentious theological or ecclesiological differences. Combating religious illiteracy is obviously something that Pope Benedict is very engaged in. He, of course, is a scripture theologian, so he, I think, would have a lot of common cause with you. But two things he's doing institutionally over the next 18 months is, the first is to have a synod of all the Catholic bishops of the world for the new evangelization. And the new evangelization is basically a way of getting Christians to wake up again to their faith. And that's a very important thing, and starting with the bishops, but of course including all the church, all the lay people. And many of us are involved in study groups to look at what the Catholic Church teaches in its catechism and what the Second Vatican Council taught. And of course these are scripture-based, so there are biblical references involved.
So you heard a resonance here in our talk about the deficit, the illiteracy, that you see some positive responses.
No question the Catholic Church is thinking along the same lines. The second thing is I wouldn't be as skeptical or afraid of using reason to defend the faith. While reason might not be able to come to the same conclusions automatically without any reference to revelation and scripture, there's no reason to be afraid of using reason to make the case why Christianity is important not only to the future of Europe, but to the future of humanity. And the third thing is, and I think this is where reason again leads us to, if you look at the state of fertility rates in Europe, the demographic decline is a complete disaster. Every single social problem that can be discussed here today is going to be affected by radically shrinking families. And what's at the core of radically shrinking families is also a crisis of marriage. And until we understand the dynamic between male and female, husband and wife, and recover that Christian contribution to our understanding of marriage and family, all of these kind of things will be useless, right? I mean, you can avoid that. So those are the three things I would take away. And
thank you for bringing that in, because that is a major omission in our time. We should have addressed that issue. Secularism tends to produce lifestyles that undermine sustainability. I think sustainability is an argument that we should start to use. And because same-sex marriage, life as Sex in the City type of lifestyles undermine sustainability, we are shooting ourselves in both feet. Thanks for that reminder. Tova, what are you taking away from here?
Taking away that we are in a car crash and that we don't know how bad it's going to end.
I think that's one of the most graphic images that come out of our time together, the car crash image.
That my hope is bigger than my despair. I realize that Europe, I know that Europe is based on the book, but I think Europe has forgotten the author. And that's kind of what is ringing in my head, that we have to remind Europe about the author of the book. There needs to be a recovery of story, straight from the beginning, where we get the dignity. We heard about the dignity of human life. It's also a creation. We get the purpose, our job description. So I think we need to recover our story right from the beginning. Otherwise, we will continue to focus on that escalator going up to heaven, that we prepare people how to die but not how to live well. I have a sense that we are sitting with two sides or two pieces of a sword, the sword of revelation and reasoning. That's a sense I'm sitting with for Christians here in Europe. We know thinking is important, there's that reasoning part, and there's faith is important, but we don't quite know how to put that sword together. So I think that's a massive need for us to find out how to put the sword together so we can both make sense and have faith. Peter Ørsted, who is not here today, who could have been here, I think, he's a Danish scientist and a wonderful believer, and he said, you have to believe in order to know. And he was in a newspaper a couple of years back, which is just a wonderful marrying of the two, and yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Leonard, what do you think?
Thank you very much for being part of this wonderful conference. I think it has been a wonderful opportunity to meet, and it has been highly qualified contributions and lectures that we have been able to dig deeper into the different groups. So thanks a lot, all of you that gave these interventions. It would be unfair to focus on one thing, actually, but I still do that, and that is that I think that when we put the question, game over, and at the same time also present hope for Europe, that we should also dig into the vocational question. What are the youngsters? What are your children? What are my children? What are we telling them to focus our life on? Not just when it comes to faith, but also vocations. And traditionally, Christians have went into vocations where we have focused on relations. Education, social matters, social care, and health. And that we in the meeting of the people still could have a wide network all over Europe and our different nation states to meet people in their life situations. So vocational calling, and that we do not lose a generation, because if we lose one generation, then the chain that we have been a part of, that is lost and that is cut off for the future. And therefore we have to win every generation, and not at least the young generation and the youngsters. Could I just conclude with one thing, and that is that when we meet like this, we have to be concrete when we come home in our different circumstances, but that we also maybe should have an opportunity to address one another in the smaller groups already day one. I think that it was wonderful to come closer to one another today. Maybe that would have been even more wonderful to do the first day. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I think just having had this 24 hours together, there's so many things beginning to come to the surface. We feel easier with each other. There's so many things we want to say. And as I look around the room, I just see so many people with so much expertise to offer. it's frustrating to hold a 24-hour event, but that's the nature of the game, and I know that I would love to get concluding remarks from a number of you here.